For those of y'all that don't know, the art commentary community, also known as the ArtCC, is a subsection of the general YouTube commentary scene that focuses on artist-related situations within their circles. They fell apart for a bit a few years ago after the Creepshow Art situation went down, and as they were scattered about not knowing whose Twitter page to follow or whose Discord server to join, they would find themselves heading to a place called the Senate, a Discord server owned by someone named Lio Convoy, ushering in a new era of the ArtCC. Sooner than later, things will fall apart in expected fashion, however. But before we get into all that, we must first start from the very beginning and ask ourselves, who exactly is Lio Convoy? Back in the day, Lio Convoy was known as Lio Convoy's Reviews, in which he would review a multitude of his personal interests like toys and the 80s cartoon series Thundercats on his YouTube channel. The toy interest in specific is the more interesting of the two, as this would lead to him becoming a fan of the channel Retro Blasting, a toy review channel run by Michael D. French where he talks about anything toy related. The channel will talk about things like Star Wars and Ghostbusters and other classics like Masters of the Universe and G.I. Joe, and it was your typical niche type of content on the platform, but Michael here had a knack of getting himself into drama, and one of those dramas will lead into Lio's first foray into what he would become known for in the future. Back in 2018, toy company Hasbro would announce HasLab, a Kickstarter-like crowdfunding service where people can fund the production of certain more expensive collectible toy ideas they find the most interesting. After this news dropped, a man named Paul who runs a website called Jedi Temple Archives would express his excitement for the possible creation of a toy based off a scene from Star Wars Episode 6 and write a blog post about it on February 17, 2018. Michael didn't feel the same way about this as he has a dislike for Disney owning the Star Wars IP and would make a video talking bad about the funding for the project and saying how he won't support it, throwing soft shade at those excited for the project as he thinks it's just Hasbro being cheap and trying to siphon money from the older adult collector crowd. Paul will put out a since-deleted blog post criticizing Michael for being rude and assuming people who are excited for the project aren't financially literate or buying into false hype, with this entire situation so far being nothing exactly interesting going on. This would, however, turn into Michael talking trash about Paul and his fans on his Facebook page, basically turning into a nerdy slap fight over opinions on Hasbro and the ethics of the toy industry. Lio comes into the mix after getting him onto his channel for a podcast episode, in which they vaguely mention Paul before going on about toy community related stuff.
It's kind of like what happened with me just recently, where I did not say that an individual backer of this thing was unethical. I said a channel of influence trying to convince people to get on a payment plan so they can reach their 5,000 goal is unethical.
Lio would also mention how he would start to argue with people about this stuff online, a trait of his that would become very well known about in the future.
And I said this in the comments, and then it wound up, of course, derailing into absurd personal attacks, which I roll with because at this point I just don't care.
Michael continued to talk about the Paul situation on the World Class Bullshitters podcast and say how he tried to get him to take down his video but wasn't going to, and in April would vague post in a negative tone about the Star Wars IP, coincidentally right around the time the toy he was talking about funded, meaning he was probably just coping that things weren't going the way he wanted them to. In fact, just a day prior, another toy reviewer named Denobi2 would make a video talking about this very news, and in said video he talks about how he believed Michael was trying to sabotage the funding because he's a hater in general.
The fact that he personally went out of his way, his own little personal crusade, went, in my opinion, to see the campaign fail. I really do.
1 year later to the date, Michael would end up making a video showing that he got the toy in question, not because he bought it himself, but because a viewer named Brent that lived in Australia couldn't get it shipped his way, so he donated it to Michael instead. However, the next day he would make an update video saying he was going to return it to Brent as people are making fun of him for supposedly going against his beliefs, with them also saying that this Brent person was made up as a way for him to not admit he bought it himself, with one of those people being Denobi himself.
Oh, hello there. I'm Brent from Australia.
I don't think you're real.
Well, of course I am. I'm the one that wrote that letter.
He would then make a second video basically telling Michael to prove that Brent is a real person as people kept saying and such, and things were overall seeming like a tame little internet beef that wasn't of much interest at all. That is until Michael would post a since deleted video allegedly showing Dan's private information to all his viewers, with Dan making another video explaining that he had to file a complaint to YouTube because of it as he has a family to protect. While we don't know what exactly was shown in Michael's video as there's no archive of it, he would end up sending a very long email to Dan that alludes to the info being found on his Facebook page after looking and piecing together context clues like his face and full name being seen in the description on some of his uploads. The whole base of the email reads like someone overreacting to the most basic form of internet criticism quite possibly on YouTube, and at the end he tells Dan to delete the videos he's made about the recent situation going on as he wants things to end. Dan would reply in a light tone, not scared or offended or anything by the stern messages, and things would end off with him deleting all 3 videos he made and Michael deleting the one where he shared his private info, with their beef ending off that very day. Now, while it was pretty unhinged and rather insane for Michael to dox Dan over petty toy reviewer drama, they came to a resolution together, so by all means at least they were able to talk it out and fix things between one another. However, in the background, Lio would jump right in, as after Michael would tell him about Dan reporting his video, he would upload his own to defend him the very day the videos are taken down and show his viewers that Dan is stupid and stuff. The video is quite literally just Lio overreacting to basic internet beef for a good minute, before directly mentioning how he found his info on him by checking his email that's attached to his channel, then going on to say how he won't show any of that on screen but instead in a Google document to circumvent Dan's ability to report the video for containing his full name.
Well, Dan, know this. Your email address is easily accessible on YouTube, a feature you directly allowed. And that's all it takes to do a deep dive on you. But here's where I wreck you, because I'm not going to put any of that on screen, nor will I speak of it in the video directly. But the viewers here can feast their eyes on the pinned comment to see what type of man you really are deep down.
Lio would hold true to his word and link a Google document for his viewers to click on, a document that has him stating his intentions aren't malicious despite what we just heard and that he isn't doxing him, while also showing his full name that I blacked out myself, before showing old court records of him guilty for theft in July 1998 and trespassing in July 2000. That's right, Lio Convoy got Dan's rather tame criminal record to epically own him over internet toy reviewer beef between him and his friend Michael. Mind you, Michael was the one who allegedly had his full name in that deleted video of his, and given how things have gone so far, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Lio who gave Michael's name to begin with. Dan didn't seem to do anything about this either because he couldn't report the video or simply didn't know it existed, and Michael would move on and post a video on June 1st, 2019 where he flew all the way to Australia to give Brent the toy he originally backed over a year ago. The Denobi beef wasn't over yet, however, as on January 19th, 2020, Michael would email him back after he struck down Lio's video for copyright, with Dan saying he didn't do that but that he ran a new copyright tool that YouTube recently introduced and it was flagged down for using his content after he told people he didn't want them to do so, ending things basically saying he doesn't want to deal with their shit. Michael would reply saying how he's been harassing him in the past despite their old beef being none of that at all, going on a rant about how he's acting in bad faith with Lio and telling him to release a copyright strike against him. Dan would say he did make those videos about him, but that Lio should have minded his own business and stayed out of their beef to begin with Michael now calling him a sociopath because buzzwords make people feel smart when arguing. The exchange would end off with Michael playing up the same act of his and Dan saying that YouTube said it was okay to strike the video down, with no more emails coming after those final words to one another. Now, we didn't know what video Dan struck down yet, but that question would be answered later that day as Lio would upload a video confirming it was the old video where he posted that Google Doc to his audience, going on to say that the reason he's been blurring out info in the current upload was so Dan couldn't report his video to YouTube, then going on to threaten him because his info is public now after what he did last year. On February 9th, 2020, Lio would upload a video promoting his expose on Dan that he uploaded on BitChute, with no reason given as to why he didn't upload it on YouTube yet. Michael would repost the video on his Facebook page for his followers to see, and the video would open up with Lio sitting in his chair wearing a lion mask and saying Dan's full name for people that click to watch.
Today's person of interest, Denobi Ortiz, doesn't seem to like people talking about the Bible.
He would give a quick rundown of their beef and even cite the art of war as some sort of intimidation tactic, before going on to say the reason he's uploading the video on BitChute is because the info he's going to speak about will let Dan report it on YouTube, basically admitting to showing and talking about private information on the man, again, over petty internet toy beef that he wasn't a part of until he inserted himself into it.
The type of data I'm going to put out about Denobi would surely make him copyright strike or privacy strike the video there. But here, he can do none of that.
He would go on to claim that Dan's family wasn't actually in danger when Michael made that video on him and that he was just afraid of people finding dirt about him, going on to show an old channel he had that had his full name for the world to see in the description.
Your family wasn't threatened. You just knew your name being public would lead to people finding dirt on you. Your claim is that your legal name isn't public by ordering that privacy strike. But What's this? A Denobi channel ran by you with your legal name made public? Oops. Looks like you did an oopsie.
Lau would then talk about Dan's legal issues before getting into how he was running a raffle during the old Michael beef and how he was technically breaking Nevada law where he lived, clearly nitpicking for the most mundane thing to put against a man to paint him as a scammer and a criminal.
Also, you have to make sure purchase entries and free entries have the same chance of winning, which Denobi violated immediately by having people that buy his mugs have a second entry. Then again, the man already has a criminal past, so I'm sure exposing this won't bother him one bit. Granted, I make no claims that he'll be convicted for any of this, but it is a gross misdemeanor. At least according to the law.
He would say how he was grifting off the old beef and that the copyright strike was only over a 10-second clip that he used of him in his video, showing that Dan manually reported it in the process. He would then show an email that he sent directly to Dan that he's going to go through with legal action if he keeps things up, with Dan replying that the strike has nothing to do with fair use but how he used his content in his video while also vaguely threatening legal escalation himself, before Lau rages on about how he never de-escalates stuff and that he hunts predators and will always keep things rising until the other person backs down.
Danobi Ortiz, I want you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say. Do not ever try to play that game with me. I don't de-escalate. I go full scorched earth. Michael is a peaceable man. I am far more comfortable with conflict. I've been hunting actual predators for years now, and I've been dealing with lying clowns like you my whole life.
Lau would go on to say how his clip was fair use, even showing how Dan didn't even sign his name properly in the initial YouTube copyright strike.
I didn't notice this at first, but my pal Coyote Lovely did, and we had a good laugh at your expense, Denobi. Thank you for your stupidity.
The strike would obviously get dropped due to Lio's video not being copyright, and Dan would give it one more shot at getting the video taken down by filing a privacy complaint to no avail. Lau would end the video off going on an unhinged rant over this rather mundane situation to begin with, so take a listen for yourself to really grasp what we're dealing with here.
You claimed earlier that you were protecting your family by hitting Michael with that privacy notice. But the truth is the biggest threat to your family is you, because you will raise a generation of kids that'll share your same lack of moral conviction. The best thing you could have done as a father is learn from your criminal past and do better for your kids. Instead, you just moved those old bad habits onto a new platform. Make no mistake, Denobi Ortiz, your channel is a cancer, and it is my fullest hope that this video causes your channel to plummet. For those of you upset about that statement, don't worry. He has a full-time job. I know what your job is, homeboy. I even left you a voicemail when you filed the DMCA. But I'm not going to contact your employers about this. I probably should, but I won't. Your sins are yours, and it's within the scope of YouTube and the collectors community to address it. I will not attack you by forwarding this to your workplace. While you're a human piece of garbage, your kids don't need to suffer because of your evil any more than they already do. You want to play pretend that you're being big here? Raise your kids with better values. Next time you want to play big man and bump your chest out at someone, you better know how hard they'll hit back. If you're going to hit the king, you better kill the king.
Michael would also put out a video about Dan on BitChute as well for the same reason as Lio, but his isn't of much importance, so there's no need to go any deeper. This beef was insanely overblown by two man-children who clearly don't know how to handle things in a mature way. Michael tries to paint it like Denobi was a massive harasser when all he did was give his opinions on the man, and at that, the allegation that Dan made saying that Brent wasn't a real person isn't even a drastic career-ruining one, as there are far worse things that people could say about one another online. Michael wasn't being harassed by Dan, he was simply annoyed that someone was saying mean things about him, but instead of ignoring the guy or explaining that he was wrong, he turned that into finding out his real info and posting a video with it before they agreed to take their videos down on each other. He's still talking about it this past April, bragging about surpassing Dan on YouTube and trying to paint it like he was a bad person when he was the one who doxed him, but I digress. Lio wasn't even part of that initial beef, but he would insert himself into it by making that Google Doc about Dan for his audience as we saw. While it was pretty obvious at this point Dan indeed manually put in the copyright strike even though the video was fair use, it was most likely because he didn't like that Lio basically doxed him to all his viewers, even if he was incorrect on his course of action. There was no reason for Michael and Lio to escalate things by gathering and publishing his private information. It was clearly just an intimidation tactic to shut him down, and the fact that this all started over fucking toys just makes it that much more deranged to witness. Now, Lio here was involved in another situation back in September 2018 when a minor named Mint Heart told her friends that they were sexually assaulted by her mother's boyfriend at the time, with the news coming to the attention of Lio and his friend Joshua Videa. They would end up in a Discord call together to discuss on what to do about this, in which Lio says that one of the options would be to set up a camera to record her that very night in case he does so again.
Well, yeah, I'll leave that to her discretion, or her other option is, of course, to set up that camera tonight and see what happens.
Oh, I was just saying to leave her phone plugged in and just have the phone pointed at her, because nobody's gonna suspect a phone on the bedside.
No, but you can. If you see the screen, you can see that it's recording.
Yeah.
So I flip it over.
Yeah.
I think it'd be better. If she surely has a desktop PC or a laptop.
She got a new laptop, yeah.
Yeah, put the camera on that sucker, have it recording in the corner, minimized, and you're good to go.
Now, obviously, telling a minor to record her potential inadvertently producing CP is an extremely bad look, but there's no point in hammering in on this for too long, as thankfully the idea was never followed through with, instead deciding to run a GoFundMe for Mint Heart to move her out to her own place. Mint Heart would state that her mother seemingly not caring was the reason why it was made, and there's also this undated YouTube comment where she states she went to the police but they didn't do anything about it. Videa was originally helping run the GoFundMe, but behind the scenes will hand it off to Lio. And while the exact reason isn't known and probably never will be known, it showed that Lio had a lot more interest in being hands-on with the situation than it originally seemed. Now, this GoFundMe would do fine and people donate to help Mint Heart out in this tough part of her life. However, there's this undated call before April 2020 I found where Lio would get Mint Heart and an adult who was creeping on her to confront each other on Discord, a call that, while isn't exactly worth anything of note, it's just really weird to see a fully grown adult use a minor and their creeper to entertain themselves instead of keeping the two away from each other, even if the minor asked for this to happen to begin with.
Is there something wrong at the moment?
Is there something? You were orbiting a child, you mental infant!
Now, the reason I know the calls before April 2020 is because Videa himself got into drama that very month that blew up in his face. To make a long story short, Videa was trying to bait drama on Twitter in April 2020 because he was bored, typing out some pretty suspect stuff about underage girls and such on a Zoophile police account, the very first attempt by Lio and friends to go after Zoophiles online. This would cause Lio and friends to disassociate with the man as what he said was really stupid and gross. And this was in fact the reason that his friend Queen Seraphina created her Discord server, The Senate, as she claimed so herself in a video she made about Videa.
On April the 26th, 2020, Lio and I separated from Top of the Barrel and settled in a backup server I made that is now known as The Senate.
Videa wouldn't like this and would go on to threaten to dox Lio and his family in an attempt at revenge against his former friend. This drama would take a turn for the worst, as just 2 days later someone named Jazz would come out and expose him for grooming them all while he knew they were underage and he was an adult, such as sending nude images of himself to them and even threatening them after they were 18 as they had begun going around telling people about their relationship behind the scenes, saying how he'll call her mother and such. He would get his shit kicked in and some more miscellaneous stuff will happen, but things seem to end pretty quickly for the man in his online activity. Obviously, this is already a pretty bad look, but where things get interesting is that this wasn't the only minor Videa was talking to like that. In fact, Videa had been talking to none other than Mint Heart herself for years at this point since he was 22 and she was 13. And despite this recent stuff, she wouldn't come out about her experience with the man until September 2020 when he was around 27 years old now, just a month after she moved into her own place once she turned 18. Videa would threaten his own life in an attempt to control her and cause her stress, in which she would make an attempt on her life but thankfully get the proper medical help she needed to get through things. Now, even though Videa was gone from the brony community by this point, he would move on to another one soon after, that being the Dead by Daylight community, now using the name The Drunken Legion in his online streaming adventures. He would meet someone named Jib sometime in summer 2020 when they were just 16 years old, in which they would become friends and chat with each other about their lives and such. Eventually, the Mint Heart news would come their way and they would talk about it with Videa, with him still trying to keep them around because he's sick in the head like that. Jibs would actually open up about their experience with him in that Queen Seraphina video I just showed, saying how they had a bad habit of removing and re-adding him because they missed talking to him despite learning these bad things about him.
There began a cycle of me repeatedly removing Videa, adding him back because I miss chatting with him, and I'm a little dumb sometimes. Then removing him again, because either something major would happen, I'd have a breakdown, or a friend would ditch me for talking him to him still.
It was very clear that Videa was manipulating yet another impressionable teenager, and eventually people would contact Jibs and get them to finally drop the guy once and for all. After worries of her mental health deteriorating would persist, Mint Heart would end up moving in with Lio to live at his own home in March 2021 just a few months later. It just so happened that Lio would go on to adopt Mint Heart and start calling her his daughter, despite this not being an actual real legal adoption and just some weird online LARPing shit. A leaked DM from Mintheart right around sometime early May 2021 would even show that Lio had adopted 2 other girls alongside herself, with one of them apparently being married as well, in which she says that he calls them his own kids now, despite again this not being a real adoption but just some really weird online LARPing. Despite the extremely weird look that it is pretending to adopt 3 different women online and call them his own kids, Lio's community seemed to not have an issue with it, either because they were too gullible to understand this is very weird or simply didn't care. Lio's reputation after this in the Senate and the general niche art commentary community sphere was seen in a good light due to his and Queen Seraphina's work to expose Videa and his crimes to the wider public, but it was a couple months after this video was posted where things started to really form together here. After her drama where she was wrongfully dragged by the RCC, Hopeless Peaches would wander around the wreckage and find herself becoming close with Lio, officially becoming his 4th daughter of his sometime in March 2022. It just so happened that very month Peaches would find herself in online drama, and with Lio now at her beck and call, things are about to get a whole lot easier for her to handle now. In fact, during a drama she was vaguely a part of that month, he would mention in a call he's a pedophile hunter again with someone backing him up.
I'm in 2 communities. The boomer cartoon community, I hunt pedophiles. Go ahead and tell me how it's stupid to hunt pedophiles.
No, he is actually a pedophile hunter. He actually hunts down.
However, despite this claim, Lio doesn't really do much other than bully them in Discord calls for the Senate and his YouTube fans to enjoy, as the one and only person he ever got arrested was Joshua Videa from earlier, not because he was a pedo mind you, but because after calling the police on him he would go on to assault his mother after being sent in for a mental health evaluation and they would step in and do the rest. Videa also hacked into some BronyCon information database and leaked a bunch of private information about the guests too, in which he would get arrested for that and was booked in Brunswick County, North Carolina for what he did after they were made aware of that. Lio would run with this reputation as a super serious predator hunter, and with Peaches now under his wing, she'd refocus her content to be more about the same subject matter, such as making a video about Coyote Lovely back when that news dropped in early 2023. This content would revitalize her career as a predator hunter alongside Lio, and they would continue to work on many projects, such as a video about known YouTube troll Smash Bandicoot for example. However, in the opening section of this video, Lio would show people he was willing to abuse YouTube's copyright system in order to get his docs information, as he explicitly talks about how he did so before getting into everything.
The day I uploaded the first video was not only Smash's birthday, but also the day his channel went down. Why was that though? Well, it's because I issued him a copyright strike. You see, he used art I commissioned for a thumbnail to do a stupid video threatening my family and I. This strike served 2 purposes. The smaller purpose was to throw dirt in his eye, and the main purpose was to gain entry into Smash's info.
Now Lio would justify his actions by stating how Smash is a known degenerate who spams porn to anybody including children, so nobody on that side of the internet would give him any flack for this because what he did was seen in a morally good light. And I understand. Smash is a heathen on society and he should get arrested and sent to jail as soon as possible. However, him willing to show that he would do whatever it takes to get the personal information on someone was interesting, and he would confirm that he was able to get information like this through this stunt.
I may sound a bit insensitive when I say this, but at this point, I don't care if people think the strike was too far. He's a degenerate scumbag, and frankly, it's a courtesy that I don't actually publish his identifiable information for the stunts he's pulled.
While one can easily morally justify it with Smash Bandicoot, if you remember, Lio got identifiable information on a toy reviewer who simply said mean things about his friend, something that wasn't justifiable in any way, period. Now, one of the projects that Lio and Peaches worked on together was their videos on Spocter, a former YouTuber with over 300,000 subscribers. The Spocter situation is what will get more mainstream eyes to take a look at Lio and Peaches, introducing a whole lot of people outside the RCC to this new era of its existence. More and more people start to look into them and their antics that go down in the Senate, but that begs the question, what exactly is the Senate to begin with? The Senate was a Discord server that was set up on April 26, 2020 by Queen Seraphina and friends after Joshua Videa started posting suspect stuff that eventually led to his exposure. However, this wasn't the first server that they all met in, as Seraphina and friends were already acquainted in their previous server known as Top of the Barrel. While it's virtually impossible to find anything concrete about what went down in that server, when I was asking around the grapevine, the kinds of stories I heard about it reminded me a lot of the old ML Poll days back on 4chan. For those who didn't know what ML Poll was, it was an April Fool's prank on 4chan back in 2017 that combined a My Little Pony and politically incorrect boards to cause some chaos between 2 vastly different parts of the website. The thing is, however, despite the board's users seemingly being the complete opposite of each other, they would get along much better than anyone ever anticipated, as the trolls and edgy people from both sides would start to go back and forth talking about their shock on just how well they got along together. After all, old school 4chan was a different breed of the trolliest and edgiest people on the internet, with the multiple boards being the one thing that brought in a specific interest of the same personalities, and when putting aside those main interests, they found themselves enjoying one's company in a twist of fate and forever remembered in internet lore for that very short period of time. The reason I bring this up is because Top of the Barrel was an old brony Discord server, and I was able to get my hands on a handful of old recordings of stuff that went down in some of their Discord calls. The way these calls progressed immediately reminded me of that same old trolly and edgy nature of the early to mid 2010s internet, and as I went through each and every one, I realized that Top of the Barrel was similar to those old 4chan and mopole trolls in every way possible. This was the Wild West of the internet back in the day where normal rules don't exist, and so the members didn't abide by these internet rules and expectations that we become accustomed to, and it's just so fascinating to listen to.
Alright, let's make this very quick then. You come into the server, you start running your stupid teenage mouth about threatening people with knives, talking about how you have 2 knives, how we've done illegal activity. Put up or shut up. What illegal activity has gone on in the server? You hum me one more time and I will call your parents. Answer my questions.
Well, for one, you can't dox people, actually.
Define doxing and give me a state legislature. Give me a penal code that varies state by state. I want to hear one. Because doxing is not illegal in 90% of states. So what state am I from? Because you're talking to the man who doxes in this server.
Myers, here's the thing. Leo has your address, right? And he just shared it with me. I'm not that far away from your house.
CPS. Call CPS. Call CPS. Call CPS. Call CPS.
Hold on. What goes on in your house? Tell me.
Call CPS. Call CPS.
First off,
No.
It's not home. She's at work. What I'm trying to tell you
Doesn't matter.
is that even though she doesn't change she does every now and then. Otherwise, I have to.
Yeah, every now and then. She should be able to take care of her own kids every time, every day. You're a shitty uncle. Take care of your nephew.
Are you uncle, bitch? Are you uncle? Are you?
I am.
Am I uncle? No, I'm not uncle.
Then shut your goddamn mouth! I'm not gonna call CPS, but I'm gonna make sure she does her job.
Okay. What are you gonna do about it? How are you gonna make sure?
Yeah, what exactly? How about the fact of the matter? She has a shit ton of stuff right out there. I could set it right on fire outside.
And then you go to jail for
getting jail.
I don't care. I'll kick her out of the house.
You wait 3 days to have an overreaction to a hyperbolic statement made you get a reaction from you. You took it as though I was making an actual threat. Panzer, if I actually had the intention to your boyfriend, I would be in Germany right now.
Hey Panzer, call the police right now in the call. Do it.
Panzer, if I were to message your boyfriend right now, how would you stop me?
Well, I would tell him to just immediately block you so that you can't message him any further.
You don't think if I really wanted to, I couldn't find him in some way or another?
Probably, yes.
I know that was a long watch of some of the highlights from Top of the Barrel, but this is like a blast in the past on what the remnants of the old edgy internet days were like. You heard how Lio admitted to being a doxer and using white pages to get people's info. And the most interesting part is that this kind of stuff is normal in these niche corners of the internet. Obviously, this isn't a good look at all in the mainstream public, and I agree it's very bad. But in these niche circles, this is just another way for people to get their laughs for the day. And seeing how Top of the Barrel used to operate helps me understand how the Senate was like when it was first made back in April 2020. Top of the Barrel was also the beginning of Lio and his predator hunting career as well, as the first ever situation he found himself in was the Toon Critic Y2K stuff after he inserted himself into it from way back when for those that remember. Now for the first year and a half, the Senate was basically like Top of the Barrel. However, with Lio and Queen Seraphina starting to gain a reputation in the ArtCC by helping out content creators in that space with their own issues, the people who started to join the place weren't the typical edgy trolls, but young teenagers and adults who were in the general art community online and for more mainstream internet circles or threatening to dox people wouldn't fly. That doesn't mean stuff would slow down, however, as there's a recording where Lio got someone's mother's phone number and called them.
This is his mom. What's going on, dear?
Well, your son has apparently taken some enjoyment on going online, defending people who children and animals, and threatening to one of my kids.
What?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you know what? I just got home. I'm on the way in the house right now. And we're gonna get to the bottom. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. I understand. Most parents don't know what their kids are doing online. I know he's on the spectrum, but he's been doing this for a while now, and I think it's better you find out than have the cops knock at your door, because that's the other option I have available, and I don't want to pursue it.
Don't take too long. Hurry up. Talk to me, son.
I don't know what you want me to say. I wasn't being legitimate when I said that. I was trolling.
Listen, then you can't be online because nobody understands that you don't understand the ramifications of what you just put out there because you have autism. You don't understand this gentleman on the phone. You could go to prison and this gentleman on the phone is so upset he's beside himself.
This is insanity, but again, it's just another example of niche internet entertainment that the mainstream public will find abhorrent and wrong. Yet given how we've seen that Lio has been doing this for at least over half a decade now, it's clear he never saw an issue with it because he's been doing it for so long. After Creepshow Art's downfall in 2021, a lot of refugees from the Art CC will end up finding their way to the Senate, in which it would start to very slowly change the vibe from one whose morals, or lack thereof, stem from old school internet trolling to a mixture of that and what is normally seen in today's mainstream circles where none of that doxing and such would fly. In April 2022, be it because of the art kids joining, not wanting to deal with online stuff as much, or a little bit of both, Queen Seraphina will end up kicking out all the minors from the server. She would eventually promote Lio as a new owner in June 2022, just 2 months later, meaning that the Senate was now under Lio's control and what went down in there would reflect back on him. Things would be fine for a bit until August 21st, 2022, as Queen Seraphina, server mod Baji, and other people would raid the Discord server as someone named Gilded Poo after he called Lio names on Twitter and someone dropped a link to his own in the Senate, with Baji sending a shock image of a dolphin horse vaginal vor comic in the server before they all got banned. Now Gilded is an old school edgy troll just like him, and his own server members would counter raid the Senate 6 hours later, posting shock images like scat and a chicken image, with that image being a close-up of a guy sticking his member into a freshly slaughtered chicken head. It's important to point out that Gilded wasn't the one who posted the chicken image, it was someone else who admitted to it months later when talking about it when the subject was brought up. Queen Seraphina even told people that they were just trolls and not into the stuff they posted, showing her fairly representing the situation to people. Now nothing would come of this situation initially and both sides would move on because it was just a pissy match at worst. However, Gilded would start to look into some of the members such as Cody Lovely, uploading a video talking about how he was living with the familiar face to this channel named ZR Callow on August 5th just a few days later. Coyote wouldn't like this information becoming more public and would join in on a stream with him a day later to tell him how that's not the case, a stream that Lio also joins at one point to talk to the guy himself. Lio will start to talk to Gilded about the guy who sent the chicken pic not only in his server but also Queen Seraphina's server that had minors in it, in which Gilded explains how he saved a couple images himself and considers that shock humor because he grew up in an era where that kind of stuff will happen all the time to troll people. They will start to talk about the rating itself and who sent what, in which Lio would say he considers the dolphin vor image as a form of shock humor himself, before Gilded starts to talk to him about how Lio apparently tried to grab the IP address of one of the people who rated him back.
You were trying to acquire an IP address and said you wanted to get you were going to use the longitude and latitude of whatever the to acquire it. All right, like I'm sorry, but like you can say whatever you want, but that would be doxing had you released that publicly. Yeah,
I wouldn't have. That's not how I operate.
How the am I supposed to know that?
Gilded would explain how his friend joined Queen Seraphina's server that had minors in it, saying that he pretended to be him just to confuse him more, showing that Lio officially knows that Gilded didn't send any images himself at all during these raids.
Yeah, and then later on, I made the joke, well, why don't you just like pretend you're me? And then he just fucking ran with it.
They would chat friendly for a bit about stuff and were getting along, with Lio going on to say that he wasn't angry at Gilded for what went down, with their conversation shifting back to the doxing stuff as Lio admits to releasing private information publicly on 2 occasions as they discuss whether it's morally acceptable to do or not.
I am not angry at you. I doubt you're really angry at me, and if you are, feel free to be, but Twitter's just something I have fun with.
I'm not angry at really any... Actually, like, you said that you had released public or private information publicly twice.
Yes.
I know, even in that time period, I never leaked any of that information.
Well, no.
Even though I was pissed off. So, like it's one of those things where, like, I'm not totally against leaking private information on the internet, like as in like again if it was like some in like prolific child, yeah, I probably would, I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie there.
It has to have a just reason behind it.
Yeah, like, I mean, I would do that, but the problem is like what we define as just, and that's the only thing we're gonna agree on is that if there's a kid, yeah, good enough.
The conversation would wane off from then onwards as the two went their separate ways, with Gilded and Lyle seemingly finding common ground and understanding the raids were nothing more than edgy trolling at worst.
He was a ginger, it's fine.
All right then. Well, I'm gonna have to bounce, so I will catch you guys perhaps in the future. Perhaps we'll cross paths on Twitter again and get into yet another ridiculous argument. But until then, I wish you well, and I'll catch you guys later.
As you can tell, Gilded and Lyle got along here and were able to explain their stances. Gilded doesn't have an issue with that chicken pick and similar stuff because he grew up in a shock humor era of the internet, and Lyle still finds it weird but seemed to understand Gilded's point of view and that he wasn't into any of what his friends sent when pretending to be him. It seemed that this was just a one-off situation of two troll groups butting heads for a moment, with both of them moving on in life. In some more Senate shenanigans, Lyle would also end up going to court with someone named Buttons over some petty stuff that while there isn't a need to go deep into, the fact he went to court with the random online person over whatever drama went down is hilarious to see.
The plaintiff is claiming I have made charged comments towards him. I find this claim, even above the other false claims, to be the most vile. I do not make charged comments towards anyone, aside from my beautiful wife. It's disgusting to make such false, baseless claims.
The Senate did have one more interesting thing that went down in there. Sometime in December 2022, after all the minors were kicked out, Baji would start to punish people by making them draw a panel from the Dolphin comic, in which some attempts are done by a few members like Crystal Flame, for example, with other former ArtCC members like YouTuber Just a Robot telling them no because it was cringe. It's degenerate, but again, it's shock humor, so I understand it, and within very early 2023, it was already stopped because they all found it stupid overall. It was a thing to begin with. However, stuff would escalate one day and would lead into a situation between all these people that would change things up in a very drastic way. Now, I originally had an entire section dedicated to what is known as the Predator Hunter Civil War, but after I dug through it all, I realized that it was extremely stupid and petty, and I'm not going to go into detail as it was more of a side quest than an actual important part of Lyle and his antics in the ArtCC. To give a quick rundown, that whole stuff with ZR Cattle getting exposed and Coyote Lovely trying to fuck Hypnotist Sappho be the catalyst for this. And while Lyle would start an insanely petty beef with another Predator hunter named Cass Warfox, he decided to drag Gilded Poo into the mess because of his association with the man in a video he uploaded on April 16th, 2023. Now, as we know already, Lyle told Gilded he understands he's just a troll and nothing more back in August 2022, but I want you to listen to the way he frames his issue with Gilded very closely in this clip.
Pooh is also a moderator of Cass Warfox's Fox Mafia to date. I was first introduced to Pooh in August of 2022, when himself and his BFF Adamantine decided to make mules of themselves on Twitter and YouTube, by making vile accusations against myself and Coyote Lovely on each respective platform. This was quickly followed up by Gilded Poo having someone go into Queen Seraphina's server, a server with minors in it, and spamming scat and zoo. I'm not going to verbally describe the stuff, but the description for it is on screen. A couple days later, another friend of Pooh's, called Gallagher, came into my community server, another server with minors, because these guys are too afraid of 18+ servers like Peach's server and Senate, but will happily raid ones full of kids for some reason.
Notice how Lyle fails to tell the full truth to the story at hand, instead framing it as if Gilded and his friends are going after them on their own accord when it was in fact a counter-raid started by Queen Seraphina and Baji. While the stuff that was sent wasn't good and I don't agree with it at all, Lyle has a duty to tell the truth to the story and failed to do so in order to paint Gilded as if he's into that disgusting content in the worst light possible. He would show how Gilded was still trolling people online with the shock images he had, yet frames it in a way that sounds like he's into that content, when again, Lyle already told him that he knew he was just a troll in their call together back in August 2022, yet now months later is framing him like he's a zoophile.
Well, that would be the fact that his admin, Gilded Poo, admitted directly to Cass that he owns terabytes, plural, of beast. So we have a right-wing zoo fanatic.
A few days later on the 21st, Lyle would upload an addendum to correct mistakes he made in the original upload, such as mentioning the name of someone in a bad light when they weren't bad at all. He then starts talking about Gilded Poo some more, and by this point people learn that he had a call with him back in August. Interestingly enough, he frames that call with him as trying to keep Gilded talking to figure out his damage, rather than actually understanding he's just a troll and nothing more, either meaning he was pretending to understand he was a troll to get him to keep talking, or he believed back then but now would make him look bad so he's trying to double down and try to say he was just trying to play him. Either way, it shows the kinds of dishonest mind games Lyle likes to play with people.
In this stream, I said this. Yeah, somethingwrong.com.
Yeah, and all it was about was gore. And that was where people would pass that around to shock people and them up and everything, right? It's just like, it's one of those things where I just don't give a shit.
Well, it's also fairly obvious that you're not much serious about any of this. You just do it for the lulz. So here's the context. That stream was after Pooh had been removed from Cass's server. There really wasn't anything I could do about him at that point. On top of that, I was more interested in getting him talking to find out what his damage is.
Something that's interesting is that right after this, he starts to get upset with how the Cass Warfox guy let Hypnotist Sappho speak on a stream and didn't bully her immediately, yet one can argue Cass is using the same tactic he used on Gilded Pooh by playing nice to keep her talking, yet when someone that isn't him is doing it, Lio thinks they're a bad person.
And since I know Cass and his people are really stupid, no, it's not the same as you being cordial with a monster like Sappho. You already know everything you need to about Sappho.
Right there how he says it's not the same as him trying to shut down a valid argument against him, because even though I have the same opinion that Sappho should be shat on and bullied anytime she pokes her head into the public, if someone is trying to get info, playing nice is a known tactic in doing so, and the fact Lio knows and does this as he just admitted to doing so to Gilded yet doesn't like it when other people are doing it is just really interesting to see. Also, there's this screenshot of Lio seemingly against getting any sort of law and child service figures involved in their beef, showing that hey, maybe this guy does have standards when he's beefing with online people. The next day on the 22nd, Gilded Pooh will upload a video talking about Lios, such as making fun of people for throwing a fit, not understanding he's a troll and thinking he's a zoophile after the way Lio framed him. He would then show how Lio framed the server raid as him being the first to do so when it was actually Queen Seraphina and friends. And they would actually speak in the comments on the video with Gilded confirming that it wasn't Seraphina who sent the dolphin image and that she understands why he raided back after they did so to him first, showing her maturity and understanding in this entire situation from her side of things. She also mentioned how the dolphin shock image was an old meme in Top of the Barrel, so that explains why there's a sticker of just a horse head seen on the very day the Senate opened. There's also this call I found between Lio and Gilded from March 3rd, 2023, in which they talk about the aftermath of the Coyote Lovely situation together that overall isn't really interesting or important to go over. On May 2nd, Lio will go over a document written by one of the people in this civil war, and while the document itself is mostly crazy schizo ramblings from someone who really hated him online, something that was interesting is that Lio would notably admit that his mod Lumi would fake a screenshot to cause chaos in their circles, though defends it by stating that it wasn't a crime despite the immoral action they did.
Proof of one of the mods admitting faking screenshots to spread misinformation. Yeah, they did fake and edit HTML to make you guys think other people were a mole. It's funny. It wasn't somebody fabricating evidence of a crime.
It would also bring up the claim that Lio tried to IP grab someone from Gilded Circle soon after the initial server raids back in August, and the way Lio replies implies he did so.
How's Horizon for you? Horizon? You mean Verizon? Verizon Wireless? Because that's what the IP address shows?
Verizon Wireless?
At first I thought he was just joking around after making fun of their grammatical mistake, but in the audio itself he actually does say Verizon, meaning that he did attempt an IP grab on this person.
You keep...
How's Verizon treating? Hold on. How's Verizon treating you?
Verizon? They dropped me. I have to use like...
The rest of the stream is finishing through the document and basically showing everyone that it's extremely nitpicked and schizo. And even though it does show more people how Lio has a bad habit of trying to get people's info he doesn't like, we've already seen that here already, so it's nothing new to us. This civil war would eventually wane off by summer as things kinda just drifted into the wind, and for a moment things would get pretty silent from both parties in their respective beefs. Gilded would cut off Cass Warfox for being a snake to him during all this, and Lio would upload another video about the dude a few months later, but overall, things seem to have finally been coming to a close. However, Gilded was still understandably mad that Lio implied to thousands of people he was a zoophile, and so in the background he would work on what would become the start of something brand new for this side of the internet to witness. On September 16th, 2023, Gilded Pooh will upload a video talking more about Lio Convoy. While a lot of it in that video is stuff we already learned about, there's one thing in particular that he brings up that is much more interesting than the rest. On February 22nd, 2022, Queen Seraphina will upload a call between Lio and someone named Dreadful Jax, an at the time 15-year-old who got into a petty argument in a voice call in the Senate just 5 days prior. The way the call goes down makes Lio look extremely bad, so let's take a listen at a long but very interesting clip on what went down in there.
And look.
Hi.
Yeah, Nora, you wanna know something fucking funny? You wanna know something super fucking funny, man? You have no balls.
Jax, shut up!
What the fuck's Lio?
Jax, how old are you?
How's
I'm
he
Lio,
involved?
and how old are you?
15, man. Well, you think I'm scared of you?
Oh, you don't
No,
know.
but you probably
You don't
should
know
be.
yet.
I should be. Give me a few reasons.
Well, number one, I can figure out very quickly where a kid lives by their photo, and I'm pretty sure you probably got one running around.
Oh yeah, you come to my house. I live in a gang neighborhood and I have guns, so.
No, I'm not worried.
I'll just shoot you.
Hey, retard.
Hey, come here. Man, I'm a retard. My name's Lio. I actually have guns.
I'm not worried about some dumb 15-year-old making threats about firearms. If I want to ruin your life, I'll just call your school and tell them you made the threat, and you won't get anywhere in life. You want to play this game? We can play that game.
Oh damn! You threatened to ruin a 15-year-old's life.
Hold on.
Hey, how's your mom's basement, man?
I wouldn't know. I live in Texas. We don't have basements here. Let's see if we can get you straight here.
Look, I'm gonna call you son. I don't have the retarded. I don't get the retarded genes from you, man. Right? Look, I understand you commit incest.
No.
But I'm not your incest son, right?
You got the retarded genes from your dad who ran out on you. That's why you're projecting it onto me. You're not clever. You're not smart. You're 15. You don't know what's going on in life. So
my dad's literally at my house, man. Hey, get your dad on the mic.
Go get him.
My dad's deaf hard. He can't
I'm 36. I have not lived with an old man in a long time, Scooter. Sorry.
You're a 36-year-old insulting threatening a 15-year-old? Holy shit, you are sad.
You're dumb.
Oh yeah. Say it to my face.
You are.
Oh, 35-year-old.
You want me to come to your house? Okay, cool.
I'm scared.
And that's what we're gonna do.
It didn't help that he would continue to threaten Jax after muting him, saying how all he needs to do is throw his social medias in the Senate and that the members will do the rest for him.
But you're dumb, because you're 15, and you don't think three-dimensionally, so you run your mouth off saying all sorts of stupid crap online because you don't think it's ever going to come back to bite you. I guarantee you, all I have to do is toss your social medias into another room, and they'll have your name and address in an hour. And I'm not bluffing, not joking, I've done this before.
There was also this one part where Lio and Serafina both try to get Jax to bring his mom into the call, something that's just so unhinged as it was clear that both of them were trying to bully the kid as much as they could.
Cats aren't supposed to be up there.
Go get your mom! Bring her out here! Bring your mother on
right.
right now.
Yeah, let's
my mom's deaf.
Let's talk to your mom.
Oh, cool. Then I can sign language to her. Go get your dad.
Now, as we've seen from those older top-of-the-barrel calls from earlier, Lio was already known for threatening to find people's info, and most of the time the people he would do this to were adults like Smash Bandicoot or another gross degenerate who was seen as morally justified in that community. However, you can clearly see in this argument with Jax that he knew he was a 15-year-old minor and was the aggressor the entire time, and yet he still threatened to call his school all because he couldn't get the upper hand in an argument with him. It's pretty unhinged, but where it gets even more interesting is that someone on June 26, 2023 would get Lio into a call and ask him about the Jax situation, in which he had this to say about it.
You want to know what happened with him? He was pulled into call independently, not given any roles, to try to get him to stop beefing with some other dumb kid. I hop in the call and Jax loses his mind, threatens to shoot me, threatens to do all this, couldn't call his parents because they're deaf, which is why he gets away with this nonsense. So instead I called his school. Because as you know, Pizza, we live in the United States of America, where school shootings are pretty common. And the last thing I want is to have this idiot pop off his mouth about how he's been in gangs and how he's hurt people and how he has guns and do nothing, only to find out, the kid went psycho and killed people.
That's right. Lio just lied to this person about how the events went down because, as we just heard, he was the aggressor the whole time and threatened to show up to Jax's house, and in this call would even confirm that he followed through with this threat to call school all over a petty internet yelling fight. In leaked DMs at Queen Serafina, he even states his intentions was to give him a good scare, showing how blatantly malicious he was treating Jax after he stood on business when Lio was trying to threaten him into submission. Jax would even end up in a short interview with Gilded once he saw his video, stating how they apparently gaslit him into apologizing to Lio despite not doing any wrong and that his school thought he was going to light the place up because of Lio's call to him.
They made me believe I was in the wrong for a while. I even apologized to Lio. My school thought I was going to shoot up the school. He tried to make me out to look like a f***ing school shooter.
Now where things get really interesting is that Mintheart, who has since come out as a transgender man and now goes by Jordan, would comment stating the mistakes Gilded got in his coverage of him in his past. Now while they did have a conversation together that isn't very important to go over, it was interesting to see one of Lio's children commenting on a video from one of his biggest detractors online, and at that, a conversation where Jordan wasn't trashing on Gilded for attacking Lio at all, but one where he was giving him a proper telling on how things went down as it wasn't well documented at the time. One could say Jordan was almost helping Gilded in a way. And when people took notice of that, they would check out his Twitter account and see that he was talking about his past trauma online in October a month later, raising even more suspicion. It would get even more interesting because Hopeless Peaches was starting to talk shit about Jordan just a few days before this by making a drawing of him in a pile of trash, calling him a loser, and notably showing what appears to be a dead cat at his feet. Nonetheless, things would carry on like normal, though an audio clip from earlier that year had Lio confirming that Joshua Videa was apparently a free man on probation and was still trying to contact his old victims.
We just passed the cops more information. We just got about a 4th victim. Now granted, Josh is currently on probation for 29 months for computer crime.
On December 10th, the Senate would announce Lio was not doing any more predator hunting and that they were slowing down that kind of activity in the server. It seemed that this was the end of an era and that it was time to move on once and for all, but things would take a sudden turn in the public eye the very next day after this post. On December 11th that very next day, a Twitter user would make a call-out post about a mutual of theirs named Miles who was apparently grooming and assaulted over 15 people. However, Peaches would insert herself into the situation, telling them to take the document down because they don't know what they're doing because they're a minor, while also trying to take control of these allegations herself in the process. The user wouldn't let up because that's some pretty unhinged behavior, and Peaches would respond saying how she's their senior and that they're rude and disrespectful and such, basically trying to bully this person into following their demands. This would all leak out to the public for people to see, and so Peaches would start to bait her life on the timeline again as she had gotten a reputation for doing so by this point in time. Soon after this happened, people found out that both Peaches and Lio entered a Discord server where they were trying to contact Miles, with Lio himself asking if someone had his IRL info after being informed that he was gone offline now. People on Twitter saw this as very unhinged behavior, and Peaches would start to break down for a bit before eventually simmering down just a few days later, talking about how she was overreacting and stuff, posting an apology on her main page for acting out of line, with Lio doing the same on his end that same day as well. Now obviously for majority on people on Twitter, this is the only time they've seen Lio trying to get someone's IRL info, so most just moved on. But on Christmas Day, Jordan would make a post stating, "He's not my dad," clearly hinting that something might have happened between him and Lio recently. It would only get weirder as a former member of the Senate named Kuma will upload a teaser video called Coming Soon on January 3rd, 2024, a video that showed snippets of an interview he had with Jordan talking about his experience living with Lio now that he was disowned by him. Things are starting to heat up, and even a side beef Lio had with Zay, formerly known as Kai Weiss, will end up giving people a little bit more to look at. The quick rundown is that Zay and Lio agreed to debate each other, but Lio flaked out and instead posted a video calling him a bunch of names and such. While it's not too important, there was a notable clip of him saying the reason he didn't end up debating Zay was because he doesn't want to be around creeps.
Now, Zay wanted me to come on to stream with them so they could press me on some things, but after looking into all of this and seeing what they'll excuse and whom they'll collude with, I can easily say I'm just not interested. Don't really want to hang around creeps.
This was interesting because Lio is mostly known for hanging around creeps, albeit bullying them like they deserve to be rather than being cordial and such. And so some people start to question why he wasn't just upfront and say he didn't want to debate rather than make a whole surprise video to try and go after him over a petty argument in the YouTube comments section. Zay would end up making a video about all this, but in the comments Jordan himself would start to talk about his experience living with Lio, saying that it took a while to trust him due to his upbringing and the general way he goes about his life and such. He would then start to allege some serious stuff against the man, like how he would yell and berate him a lot, and that one time after getting in a disagreement with his wife, he would get up in his face and threaten to beat him up, also saying how Peaches was gloated on Twitter about how he was crying. He would then say Peaches was the only daughter left of his adopted family, and that he had heavy favoritism for her compared to the others, saying how they would spend hours a day in voice calls together and say that Kuma and Gilded Poo were far kinder to him than Lio ever was. Now obviously this is all alleged stuff that Lio apparently did to Jordan as he didn't have any evidence to back up his claims, but people start to run with it because the RCC was already known to treat allegations as evidence. Things start to get even more strange as on February 9th, 2024, Kuma will upload a video called Third Child Interview, an interview between him and one of Lio's other children named Jay, who also moved into his place just like Jordan. For brevity's sake, we won't dive too deep into this as it's more unsubstantiated claims against the man. But one of the more interesting clips involved Jay also alleging that Lio showed blatant favoritism towards Peaches, even stating that Peaches would manipulate things against those she disliked.
To see signs of favoritism, apparently Peaches and I were the favorites, because everyone was mad at Opal. Everyone had to be mad at Jordan. But then it turned out that Peaches was pulling on the strings, intentionally trying to lie about Jordan, saying that he was doing all these horrible things and said horrible things, and even then, Lio would believe it.
Most of the interview would be a lot of reflection on her experience living with the guy, saying that he was a toxic individual overall, mentally abusive because of that, such as how he puts his family in danger because of this constant arrogant attitude trying to fight people online all the time.
He has always threatened to fight people, and I think that made him look incredibly idiotic. Because him sharing his information, where he lives, what he does, and all of that, he made himself look like an idiot. He's not a samurai. He's not a ninja. He's not a boxer. He's not a wrestler. He is a normal man.
As stuff was starting to slowly build up against the man and the ArtCC was starting to turn on him, a Twitter account named the Fruitcake Club Leaks, aka the FCK, would appear on the site on February 22nd bragging about having a bunch of logs that would expose a lot of people from within the ArtCC. While this was seen as a red herring at first, this would be the beginning of the biggest story in the ArtCC since the Creepshow Art situation from 3 years prior. On February 25th, 2024, Peaches would come out on Twitter and admit she was complicit in a Discord server that posted porn where minors were present when she was an adult. This caught many people by surprise as nobody knew what she was talking about, but it was starting to look like that Twitter account might be more than just some assumed random person. The very next day on the 26th, Lio would upload a video about some random drama in the Senate, but at the end he starts going after Gilded Poo again. Though this time he would mention a brand new person named Akumu into the mix, saying that he's a liar and is posting a video about the FCK after him as a way to control the narrative and that he refused to give him the logs months ago.
However, I draw the line at lying. There's a reason he's not going to release the FCK logs until after the video drops. It gives him control of the narrative. We, however, had a longtime server member give us access to the logs that Akumu will not release. Logs I asked him for months ago, by the way, that he refused to give.
Within that very day, Akumu's video would drop as he would take a dive into the FCK and show people what had gone down in there back in the day. The FCK was a Discord server made way back during the Madame drama in 2019 as they plotted against her, that which eventually turned into a place where they started to plot against Akumu himself when he was a teenager and only had 49 subscribers on YouTube. While there are a lot of names involved and there were adults posting NSFW stuff around minors, we're here to focus on Peaches, such as how people were sending NSFW images to her in the server when she was 20 years old and that she abandoned the account at one point in time. Some people were wondering if perhaps she just didn't know the ages of the people involved in the server, but that would be proven false as back during the Madame drama, Peaches would make a video defending Slamurs from her wrath, the person that Madame doxed. And for those that were there back in the day, she was a minor at the time and is seen in the server speaking and not understanding just how bad everything going on was due to her being so young.
Well, a YouTuber by the name of Madam has recently been accused of stealing art from a 15-year-old artist called Slamurs.
Now, while some people started to defend Peaches saying she didn't know any better back in the day, given she had built up a reputation for going after people yet is doing worse than some of the people she went after, nobody was letting up as things started to go DEFCON 1 in the ArtCC once again. It wouldn't get any better as there would be an instance where she would join a public call with one person only to find out he forgot to leave the call and was pleasuring himself, in which she starts to crack jokes about it instead of leaving the place right then and there due to its degeneracy. It was obvious that things were over for her, and it seemed very suspicious that she just happened to come out with this out of the blue just a day before Akumu's video dropped, and even more suspicious that Lio tried to call out Akumu for trying to control the narrative just mere hours earlier. Now, it would turn out that Lio had known that Akumu was working on a video about the FCK since March 2023, and at one point he would offer to invite Lio to the server but instead would get banned from the Senate in October that year. Things were all quiet up until he announced that he was going to release the video on the FCK on February 6, 2024, setting a premiere for the video's release on the 22nd, with the full release 4 days later as we know already. Lio would start to talk bad about Akumu behind the scenes with just a robot after he mentioned him in passing, saying he's a scumbag and apparently hangs around zoo and pedo defenders to now try and tarnish his name behind the scenes. It would get weirder as Peaches would put out that Twitter post on the 25th conveniently before the video's release, and it turns out in a leaked DM that came out to the public after Akuma's initial vid that Lio had the logs to the server for a few months now and speaking with someone who joined the server that very day. In his video he posted just hours before Akumu's, Lio says that he released it before him because Akumu was trying to control the narrative and that he kept the logs from him, but as we know by now, that's not the case as he cut off Akumu himself months prior. It was clear something wasn't right here, and given we now know that Akumu's video was first officially announced for release on the 22nd, it seemed that Lio had something more going on here than just trying to beat Akumu to the punch. During all this, that Crystal Flame person I mentioned earlier would come out and talk about Peaches on Twitter after all the recent exposure stuff went down. After this, Lio would upload a video on March 13th between him, Crystal, and Peaches, showing that they had a call together that took place on February 25th before Peaches dropped her thread, with Lio saying he never looked into the FCK logs until now, meaning that he had them on hand but just simply never investigated the subject himself.
While I had the logs for a few months, I couldn't pour through all of them at once. Asuka, someone on my staff, was the one with the logs. They're massive, and we only now had a full team to dig through them.
Well, in that video, Peaches would admit that she knew Slamur's age at the time with Lio trying to downplay because she was apparently groomed at one point.
If Slamurs was there, then I think I knew their age as 16 or 17.
Yeah, but you were also dealing with the after effects of being groomed because you were still in contact with the guy who groomed you.
So, we now know that Lio knew that Peaches knew there was at least one minor in the server. So that begs the question, While Lao's upload the very next day on the 26th, did he say that he doubted Peaches knew there were minors when she just told him about one not even 24 hours earlier.
So even if Peaches was 100% aware that there were kids in the server, which personally I doubt,
this time people didn't have to do any hard digging to catch him lying. And before Lio even uploaded the Crystal Flame video, Kumo would put out his own on March 2nd going over a lot of Lio and whatnot, given he was formerly connected to the Senate in the deeper confines of the ArtCC, giving people some insight now that this story was ramping up. Now there's a lot of testimony again, this time with Kumo playing snippets of his Jordan interview, such as Jordan saying how it was Lio's idea to move him to his place one day. He would continue to talk about Lio and how in his opinion the predator hunting gig is just a performative front to fuel his ego, going on to say this for the audience.
And I met with these two baby talking each other.
By nature are good. Anyways.
Ooh, what is that? A ducky, a ducky, a ducky,
Is that
a duck.
Part of the video even features Gilded Poo, with him talking about how he's getting rid of that hard drive with Bronto Bites Zoom material by shooting it outside his front door. Jordan would make a post confirming he left him back in October 2023 and for any Senate members to leave him alone and such for the public to see. He would then upload a video on March 7th, 2024 explaining that after his gender transition that Lio went from a somewhat nice figure to a cold one as he became verbally abusive to him.
Lio was, however, verbally abusive. That's it. He would yell at me and berate me, humiliate me in front of people, and was overall treating me like I was another one of the people in his videos.
He would go on to claim how Lio would disown him one night in a Discord call with Peaches that past October after being fed up with them, in which Peaches would catch wind of it and send text messages implying a lot of stuff like he apparently IP tracked children. Jordan would then explain how they got into contact with Gilded Poo and Kumo after seeing Gilded's video, before going into Lio talking shit about them faking having a mental illness called DID and some stuff which, I'm just gonna be real, I don't understand at all, and I'm not gonna pretend to understand, because it sounds rather completely crazy having to do with voices in his head for years until they eventually went away after their mental health stabilized apparently. It would then get a bit petty having to do with like how much money they were spending on stuff and whatnot, before ending the video off saying that he's not engaging in anything having to do with Lio anymore and he just wants to move on from all this, telling Lio that if he wants to contact him to hit him up by his phone number. Now given that Jordan literally admitted that he had voices in his head and is saying all this testimony, I'm not gonna take it serious because I can't take the word of someone who is severely mentally ill like this on such a serious scale, especially when the subject matter has to do with them apparently getting abused, because for all I know that could be those voices skewing their judgment when recording this video in the first place. Rumors will start to spread as more DM leaks will show that Lio's wife apparently disliked Peaches so much that he sat her down to talk out their issues together, with Peaches even saying that he got that to happen by threatening to walk out of their marriage, with a reason for her disliking her being she believed Peaches was a homewrecker. Peaches will also delete every single trace of her on the internet, her YouTube, Twitter, quite literally everything she built up online was now all gone sometime in early March as well. However, on March 18th she would have a friend post a document she made accusing Lio of being an abuser, also now coming out as a transgender male using the name Aaron now. I'm gonna keep this straight so y'all understand. It's obvious that Peaches only came out as a transgender man now to the public when dropping this as a way to control negative opinions about him, but I also know that they've seemed to have been hiding this for a while now behind the scenes as their Discord in that December situation I mentioned earlier had the name Aaron on it. It's a known tactic for some people to come out as transgender or gay or whatever to control narratives, but I respect it as there's evidence they were already feeling this type of way beforehand. Nonetheless, in normal circumstances I would go through each and every detail, but by now we all know that they're full of shit, plus them saying stuff like how they apparently age regress just comes off as unhinged and frankly deranged to read. I don't believe they age regress, and if they did, why should I take the word of somebody who is so severely mentally ill like that? I believe they're using this as a way to escape owning up their own shit, so let's get right back into everything and move on from this. The very next day, Crystal Flame will come out with their own video about Lio, this time talking about Jibs from way back during the initial Videa situation. The day after the Coyote Lovely situation happened in February 2023, Jibs and Lio will end up in a call together after they confessed they were still secretly in contact with Videa and gave a minor's contact info to him at his request despite knowing about his past. Obviously this isn't a good look at all, but it's not unheard of for someone who was groomed as a minor to still not have a full understanding of what is truly going on with their dynamic and still having feelings for the other person. While most people talk to someone in Jib's position in a calm but very stern manner to show them that they need to cut him off and that they fucked up, Lio would instead choose the most destructive route possible when speaking with him.
What was the final straw?
I don't remember exactly.
I'm not buying that. Not today. You've lied to me plenty of times. You sat there and thrown my trust in the garbage, so you're going to give me a doggone answer. I am not going to accept I don't know and I don't remember. I am not stupid, and you will not treat me like I am. Answer.
I know, I am just genuinely trying to remember some pieces of it. I tried to...
Why don't you go to the logs and figure it out, since you clearly have them? But you still have them in your life. Even after we tell you explicitly that that is unacceptable, after you thank us for getting you away from him, but you didn't actually get away from him, you just lied to everybody who cared enough to try to help you. And I swear to God, if the rest of you sit quiet this entire call, I'm going to remove every single one of you from staff. You people better start opening your mouths instead of leaving it to me every single time! I'm sick of it! Every time we're doing something like this, every single time we have to handle this, I'm the only one doing it! Knock it off! If you don't want to handle stuff like this, leave! Do you want me to yell at you like I just did the rest of my staff?
No.
I recommend you stop hushing and you start talking. I am so 100% done with this level of callous stupidity. I am 100% done with it. I have been as patient as humanly possible with literally everyone concerning all their nonsense, and you are sitting here right now wearing that 100% thin. Start talking. You can talk to a person who wants to down little girls. You better start talking to me. Message her right now, and you get her in this server. Because if you don't, in the next hour, I will find her again and I will call her parents on this call live.
That's just some snippets of what went down, but it was pretty clear to see that Lio was just bullying Jibs because he was angry rather than actually trying to help him out. After all this stuff came out about him, not a lot will go down for a good minute. Lio's fourth adopted child, Opal, will come out and say that he wasn't bad at all in their experience, showing a new take on a guy now that everyone in the Art CC was going at his throat. He would also get mad that people were showing pictures of his wife in their videos, something that is heavily ironic as this dude is known for looking up people's info on white pages and doxing and calling their parents, yet when he gets a taste of his own doxing medicine, he gets butthurt about it. As people waited for his response, Gilded Poo would drop another video about the man, and now that more people in those circles knew that Lio was slandering his name for the past year, it was much better received than in the past. The video itself is a lot like the past stuff he's made, just a lot more concise and includes the new stuff that's been going on recently. While it's nothing new, so we don't need to go deep into it, he says in the description he plans this to be the last time he will ever talk about any of this, showing that he was moving on from everything. All people had left was to wait and see when Lio's response would drop, and more importantly, if he could get through this mess he got himself into, or if his days of threatening and doxing people is finally over. On April 26, 2024, Lio Convoy uploaded a video titled Addressing Things, a 4-hour slog of a video going over the recent stuff that had been brewing for the past 2 months. Despite its extremely long runtime, a lot of it is just responding to hearsay or people who aren't relevant, so thankfully it's not going to be that much of a mess here. Lio would get into Jay and Jordan's allegations against him for the first 2.5 hours. Now y'all may have noticed that despite the both of them saying a lot of things about Lio that make him look extremely bad, they never showed a lick of evidence to back up their claims about the man. So it comes as no one's surprise that his response is full of a bunch of hearsay as well in defense of himself. While normally I like to break things down for people, I don't like to promote strictly hearsay as heavily on this channel, as these situations quite literally just come down to whose word you believe. You can listen on your own time if you'd like, but for now it would be redundant to spend so much time breaking down 2.5 hours of just hearsay. However, there are some interesting parts of the Jordan section, like how when Lio told his audience that his negligence got one of his cats killed.
One day, Jordan texted me letting me know Sherbert was extremely lethargic. He had deteriorated to the point that we couldn't save him, and we had to put him down. I care a great deal about animals. I always have. But for all of Jordan to talk about my verbal abuse, this is how I responded to his carelessness costing one of my pets his life. I was kind, patient. The people I've told this story to and shown these texts were absolutely enraged. They made it clear that they would not have shown them this grace. They even flatly said that Jordan would have been out that day. But instead, I let Jordan stay. The wife and I just kept a closer eye on the cats Jordan was caring for, because it was obvious he never actually paid attention to them. Sherbert was a good boy. He didn't deserve that. He'd still be here if Jordan cared about anything other than himself.
Now that is some very serious stuff to put on him. That's not to mention, his cat was clearly a little bit overweight and looked a bit on the older side in that picture he showed. It's quite possible it was simply their time to go after living their life, and it just happened to be around the time Jordan was taking care of them. It's also clear that this story was told to Peaches back in fall 2023 at the very least, as if you remember, they drew Jordan with a dead cat at his feet, so who knows how long this rumor had been going around. We don't know and we'll never know the truth to this, but for Lio to pin it solely on Jordan when there are so many other possibilities shows that he's going scorched earth to try and tear him down in any way he can. It's also worth pointing out that Lio told Akumu in DMs in April 2023 that his cat had FIV as well, meaning there might be more to this claim he's putting against Jordan than it initially seemed. Some other stuff would be said, and Lio would end things off threatening to sue him if he ever said anything libelous or having no evidence against him in the public ever again.
Once this video is out, he'll likely do other destructive things for the same reason, so I'm going to be clear here. Jordan. If you attempt to do any further libelous or destructive actions in order to damage my reputation or employment, I will not meet you with a conversation. I will meet you with legal repercussions. Think very carefully before you go on another destructive bender.
The next part is a section that some of y'all in the know might have been wondering about, and that's the Rosa Ramsey situation. To make a long story short, Rosa was a Discord mod who was given info on an alleged predator in the server she was in and didn't do anything about it. Lau would catch wind of this and start to go after the server owner, but they weren't getting back to him, so he started going after Rosa. He'd get her into 3 separate calls in the Senate to berate her, with the most infamous being a 4-hour call on January 31st, 2023. Now, I want you to hear Rosa's voice real quick just so you can understand what we're dealing with here.
Though, it's hard for me to remember all this.
As you can tell, something is a bit off about her, and it would turn out that Rosa suffers from brain damage due to frequent seizures she has, with her mother being her full-time caretaker because of this. This means that even if she was a mod in a Discord server, it's very clear she can't grasp things properly and should have never been a mod in the first place, but y'all know how these terminally online Discord servers work. If the owner likes a person, they tend to get mod most of the time. The entire 4-hour runtime of the call is some of the worst bullying I've ever listened to in a good while. And the fact that of all the places it was coming from was from the Art CC, the place that promotes itself as a morally righteous side of the internet, was just as shocking.
Exactly, like I'm bisexual. Do you want to just do you want to become my friend? Because I would rather see you stick your hand in a blender, personally.
Well, you've chosen to be. You've chosen to be an immoral piece of garbage. You've chosen to dishonor your entire family line by acting like this. Because I have a feeling if your mother knew what actually happened instead of whatever lie you fed her, she'd toss you out. Or maybe she'd beat you senseless. Either of these I am completely fine with, because frankly, I hope you never breed. I've seen pictures of you. I doubt you're going to, but I hope you never breed. Because, number one, we don't need your genes passing, not because you have autism or anything like that. I care very much so for people with disabilities, but because you have low moral character and you're going to raise your children to be just as stupid, weak, worthless, gutless like you are. The fact that you rate Star Wars and people being mean about it higher than the safety of children tells me you need to remove yourself from the census immediately. And I know you're not very smart. You're not going to pick up on that, but you know what? The YouTube censors won't either, so it's all good. Do it again, and I will find your family. I will tell them what you were doing. I will tell them all the nonsense you said. And usually, I have a caveat. If I find out like they're homophobes or something, or they might hurt you. If I find out your parents hate gay people, I'm not going to care. Not at this point. You're 30. You're 30 years old, and I will not accept any excuses because autism and seizures and epilepsy do not stop you from having a solid moral center. That's a choice you made. You chose comfort over the safety of children. And for a 30-year-old, that is disgusting. If you were 15, I might get it. Kids are dumb by nature. That, no. And not only will I do that, I also now have information about where you live because you have a Facebook account that I do know and I am aware of. And you're going to start getting a lot of reblogs from me to a lot of other people that are not going to be happy about your nonsense. Because here's the thing, people on my side of reality, people in conscious reality with moral values, don't take a lot of people making excuses like you do. At all. And you don't know how quickly that's going to spread in your town. Sooner you might be known as Rosa, the child predator enabler in your own hometown. And frankly, couldn't happen to a better person. The only person more culpable other than Star Giant is Necropon themselves. So congratulations, you're the bronze medal here. Star's the silver, Necropon's the gold. Aren't you smart? You've accomplished nothing, you have not redeemed yourself, and you never will because you refuse to take actual accountability. Instead, you want to blame conditions that were well within your control. You're dishonest, disingenuous, disgusting, loud. Never be around or talk to children again, or I will find out, and it will be ugly. You're a liar, Rosa, and you always have been, and you probably always will be. So let me go ahead and just cut through the chatter. Let me go ahead and just give everybody what they want here. Go get your mother.
It's mostly on movies, TVs, and games. All that fandom stuff.
I don't care. I literally just told you to go get your mother.
I told you, I can't. I don't want my personal life getting in the way.
You used your personal life. You used your personal life as a shield to give you an excuse to not report the fact that you had a predator in your server. Go get your mother.
I can't.
The point is, I don't even know. I did not stutter. I did not stutter. I said you will be dismissed when I dismiss you. The bell does not dismiss you, child. I do. You will leave when I tell you you can leave. When other people have had their fill, tearing into you for your immoral actions. When the victim here decides it's time for you to leave, then you will leave. I know you have some crayon drawings to do. They will wait, just like you waited.
Can I please go now?
No. I told you you're done when I say you're done, and you're going to abide by that, because God knows your parents failed to raise you with any common sense. If I had a child that did the stunt you did, oh, buddy, they wouldn't find them. They would not find them. That's one thing I've absolutely picked up from my old man. If you pull some stupid crap like that, they might find your body in a marsh about 100 years from now.
It would also come in that Rosa could only delete messages and nothing more in the Discord server she was in, meaning this entire abuse session was just that. A reason for Lio and the Sen is to get their laughs on those who can't defend themselves online. Now the way Lio goes over the Rosa call is super interesting, because he apologizes for how he was, but then goes on the offense and tries to prove how she's mentally competent when she clearly isn't.
While Peaches may have been the one to start it, that doesn't excuse what I myself allowed and said. For that, I am sorry. Genuinely. Rosa is a liar. Although they are on the spectrum and have seizures, I feel the attitude other people have towards Rosa has flipped all the way to ableism in the other direction, by treating Rosa like she has no agency because she has a handler. And months after this call, Endo asked Rosa for an apology on Twitter. Rosa's response was to say she was possessed by a demon and that she couldn't give an apology or she'd have to harm her own family.
The fact he acknowledges she is not all there in the head, yet uses an example of her not being all there in the head as her trying to avoid responsibility is ridiculous. There's nothing to do except take the L and move on here, even if Rosa is a bad person as people say. Because again, she is clearly not mentally there, and even though Lio apologized, his attempt to cherry pick examples to try and go into offense shows just how far he was willing to grasp at straws to somehow make his opposer look worse than him to no avail. Lio would then get into the Jack situation and defend himself, calling his skull as just being concerned when everyone knows it was a power play to intimidate and silence him, including playing calls of Jack sending weird voicemails to him after they exchanged numbers to apologize. Also threatening him with legal action as well at the end of his section.
Hi, Lio. The name's Tyrone, and I just your wife. You can't do jack shit about it, can you?
And Jax, any further attempts by you and your friends to harass or trouble me will be met with legal action, especially considering the deranged voicemails you've been leaving me. You said you wanted to join the army. Don't blow up because you still think your online actions don't affect your real life.
He then apologizes for the Jibs call, but doesn't play any of the audio because he says it's their story to tell, even though the audio is already out there online, but that's besides the point. Lio would then get into his experience with Peaches, saying how they started to emotionally abuse him sometime in the beginning of 2023. Now while it sounded very fishy given his record of twisting things and outright lying, he'd show a set of screenshots on how they were throwing a fit over a game of Among Us in what is quite possibly the most embarrassing thing a grown person can do, only to end up trying to bait their own life just to control him in their conversation. The fact Peaches is willing to threaten their own life to control him over something so petty in a name was a telling sign that things have been going on for a minute, as no normal human would do this on such a childish level unless they know their manipulation already works against someone. Lio would then go after Gilded Pooh and now try to accuse him of being a sexual assaulter when everyone knows by this point he's just an edgy troll and nothing more. Remember that post from earlier where he told people to not involve his family in their back and forth? Well, that would age poorly as Lio would bring up the fact he has a kid to the public and threaten to get the police involved in their internet beef.
You'd assume a man with a child in his care wouldn't be making such a spectacle of himself in this manner online, yet here he is, in his late 30s and being fine with threatening people with sexual assault. Or in his latest video highlighting the sexual harassment others and myself has faced as though it's a joke. I've also been told by another person that Gilded sounds tired, that he wants to stop getting involved in stuff like this. So here's his chance to punch out and stop pretending like he's going to come out on top. Because sooner or later, his actions will come back to his doorstep, and the police in his area will eventually get involved. It's amazing what you'll be given when you follow leads of people who know your MO. Amazing indeed.
This is extremely unhinged and shows that Lio is still okay with bringing up people's personal info to try and scare them into submission and silence, and a lot of people would catch on to this right off the bat. He would also go after Akumu and basically say he's poisoning the well, but by this point no sane person could take this guy seriously after he just threatened a dude and his kid over their petty internet beef. While it's undisputed that Peaches was likely abusing Lio throughout their relationship, his response was calculated from the moment it started. The thing is, he has a habit of trying to get in the last word so to speak and go on the offensive, be it threatening people with legal action, twisting stories to fit the narrative he wants his audience to believe, or even mentioning other people's children in an attempt to scare them into silence. It wasn't a good look at all, but this wasn't the end of everything as there was still more that would go down as the RCC crumbled apart yet again. Now Akuma would release a response video to what was going on, but we're not going to go into that today, as he was able to get Lio into an interview on April 27th, 2024. I highly recommend listening to it on your own chance, because hearing the way Lio operates outside the Senate or in private calls is so interesting to witness. At one point he says the reason he banned Akuma from the Senate was apparently because Peaches told him to. Well, there's a lot of unimportant stuff that goes down. There's one part in particular that is far more interesting than the rest. The Jax call would be brought up, and Lyle would try to not talk about it because Jax tends to act unhinged whenever his name is mentioned, but nonetheless, they're able to talk about it for a bit. Lyle would continue to deny that he threatened to show up to Jax's house despite what we saw earlier, and they would eventually play the call for him to listen to.
Well, the reason I'm talking about it with you is because you did say you were gonna go show up to his house. You said, all right, that's what we're gonna do.
I did not say I was going to show up to his house.
You want me to come to your house?
Okay, he says, say it to my face. You say you want me to come to your house.
Yeah, do you want me to?
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. Then that's what we're gonna do.
Can you rewind that?
Sure, yeah.
Your house? Okay, cool. And that's what we're gonna do.
I thought it was in relation to me talking about finding his information, so, man, clearly I was in the wrong on that one, so I'll apologize for that.
It gets even more interesting though, as the next part is perhaps the biggest example on how this guy's mental state is like, as Jax would go on to call Lyle's phone and act a fool, in which he would respond by threatening him again live on air.
Jax, you have actively tried harassing me for the better part of a month now. I don't think you really have a place to talk about other people having a life, my dude.
Instead of just paying attention on clout on YouTube, it's very jarring, to be completely honest with you.
Jax, do you still plan on joining the army?
Do I plan to join the army? Yeah. But
Then you need to knock this nonsense off, like just being 100% with the chief, because this is not going to be good for a recruiter.
What makes this so much more interesting to me is that Lyle doesn't seem to understand or realize that he just threatened a dude. In his response video and in the stream, he would go on to say that he recently tested to see if he's autistic, and let's face it, he is. And that right there is a telling sign of a lack of understanding social cues and implications on an obvious level. After seeing this happen in real time, it opens up so many more avenues on the way he carries himself, such as if he even understands that he's a malicious person or truly thinks he's not a bad guy at all. Lyle would go on to deny that he sat down his wife to apologize to Peaches at one point as well, for those wondering, which, let's be real, given Peaches is known to be full of shit, it's very doubtful that was true to begin with. The rest of the stream is nothing of importance, as it was mainly just trying to understand how this dude operates in the first place, and it was clear that he operates on a very different way than most people in this world. After seeing that Lyle threatened both him and his kid, Gilded Pool uploaded a response video going in on him now that he escalated their beef between each other to involve his family. The video is a lot more harsh and upfront about his understandable hatred for the man in a much more straightforward way than ever before, and there's even a part where he makes a good point showing a glaring issue with some of Lyle's logic.
When I was a kid, my old man abused me in every way but sexually. As is normal, I picked up some of his habits and traits, and I've been working to alter them. It's where my authoritative tone and general demeanor comes from. So, like most victims of abuse, I always worried about winding up like the person that abused me. That's one of the reasons why I never had kids. The fear that I'd wind up like him. Not that I magically knew I would.
And also, to sit there and say that I didn't have kids because I was afraid I would beat my children, you know what? Why would you sit there and adopt adults if you thought that you actually having kids would result in you being abusive towards those kids? Why would you LARP as having children if you thought you would be abusive to your children?
Now there was still more that went down, as there's a stream he appeared on with YouTuber Stardust on May 5th, 2024. Now, a lot of the beginning is mainly Stardust pushing Lyle on his logic throughout all that we've seen already in his skewed way when he did predator hunting content, and Lyle would say that he's officially done with it and dropping it entirely. They would then get into the doxing argument, and the way Lyle goes about it is so interesting to see, as he equates someone trash talking in a public Discord server to a public place in real life, despite the two not being similar in any way at all in this long but interesting clip.
Collecting somebody's information that is not accessible in one place and putting it in one place and using it to your advantage to call their parents or threaten to call their parents is still a threat, and it's still weaponizing doxed info.
That's not doxed info if it's public info. And secondly, when a child is going out of line, why is calling a parent somehow beyond the pale?
It's not your responsibility to do that. Ban that person and move on.
So it's not the responsibility of an adult to let a parent know when their child is going off the rail?
An internet stranger?
Would it matter if it was a stranger in public doing it?
If you're in person in public and this kid is punching you, that's a little bit different than somebody saying something mean on the internet.
So if a kid's sitting there screeching all sorts of threats in public, then a random stranger who hears these things shouldn't talk to the parent or try to get them?
I think that that's a bit different because you are an actual, public disturbance. That's a public disturbance. Somebody sending you messages or saying mean things on the... Yes, and you've got actually actionable things there that you can do. When it's a stranger on the internet...
But a public server isn't public.
No, it's not. No, not in the same way.
Then why is it
It's
called
not.
a public server?
It's not a shared
think that
public
part of the
space
issue
like a
here-
grocery store. Or do you need to
I
go
think
to
part of
the
the
public
issue here is
Discord
people-
server to function in your daily life? Because you do have to do that with a grocery store.
No. Well, now you don't. But more importantly, I think part of the disconnect here is that you seem to see a difference between what people do online and what happens in the regular meat space. And frankly, I think that's kind of foolish.
I think that you are making a huge mistake. You are breaking one of the internet's unwritten rules, one of the biggest unwritten rules, to not dox people when you're doing this thing. When you are threatening children for being stupid online, and you're threatening to call their parents, or you do call their parents, or you call their school, I think that that is grossly inappropriate. I think you are very clearly
talked to the
overstepping.
parents?
And if I were a parent, I would think it's weird that some stranger is calling me about my kid online.
And do you know what most of the parents that I had to contact have said when I've called them?
What?
That they appreciated it.
Okay. Do they just say that to you because you're a weirdo on the internet calling them? Or do they say, like, here's the thing, I don't give a what they say. They could say anything, and that could still be weird.
Okay, you can think it's weird all you want, but I'd rather take the opinion of the people who care about these kids.
Things that get even crazier as Stardust will bring a lawyer into the call to explain how he doesn't understand the law, in which he starts to argue with him.
Of course.
Well,
again,
it's too bad you're being inconsistent then.
Again,
When you're being
other than
inconsistent.
reporting that and getting that video flagged or taken down, there is no appropriate measure for you to try to find that information and then go out and do something with it. And you know what you're doing when you imply these things. You know what you're doing when you imply these things.
Nope. Don't play that game with me. I know exactly what I said. I never implied I'd do anything other than file a police report. You're sitting here saying you heard it, then maybe get your ears checked.
I don't need to get my ears checked, Lio. I think you're just used to speaking to people between 18 to 22 and then usually kowtowing to you, and that's not going to happen right now.
I have dealt
You
with
don't have a good grasp of the law, and you don't have a good grasp of anything else going on. No one is playing any games
why are
with
you
you.
being incredibly inconsistent? You're clearly playing some game because you literally listed the things that would qualify for that to be reported that were in that call, and now you're trying to backtrack. If you are a lawyer, which I don't know, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that you are.
That's fine. You can call me a paralegal. None of your business. I don't care for you to be trying to dox me either. But if you want to try,
okay.
I'm in.
I wouldn't want to dox you. Why would I want to dox you? Why would
I'm in New. Why would you want to dox me? Because I think you're unhinged and don't have great touch with reality.
Lai would then get into how he reports stuff to the police and explains that after he puts in a report, they send it to the FBI. But this is actually incorrect as the lawyer breaks it down for him to understand.
Anytime I've called the police and I've asked them about whether or not it is better to report to them or to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I always say it's better to report to them.
Yes,
if it is
because the Center for Missing and Exploited Children works specifically with the FBI, which does every interstate problem. You know this. I know that you know this. So when it comes to these specific crimes, though, but they don't, though.
Oh,
they
so
don't do that.
Just sit there and do nothing with it.
Yes, they are under no obligation. They are under no obligation to escalate or do anything like that.
They're not under obligation to do
taking your
anything per the Supreme Court rule in 2005.
I understand that. I understand that. And this is a different standard from the life-saving standard of that case in 2005 that you're talking about. I know which one you're speaking of. But in terms of escalating this with a police report, they're obligated to take your report. Absolutely. It can go into like the round receptacle in the trash can after that. They are not obligated to do anything, which is why I'm asking, since you work so hard and since you say that you work so hard doing these, excuse me?
Why aren't they obligated to do it?
Because it's beyond their jurisdiction and they are only paid by the people within their jurisdiction. There's no obligation for them to try to escalate those things online. No.
So
no,
they
don't.
have no obligation to report it to their superiors, which is the federal government. You're kidding me.
No, they don't. And federal government isn't their superiors, especially if it's a state police. What are you talking about? You also know this.
Then who's their superior then? Why are they not obligated to report things to the
The governor usually. I mean, the governor. Are you really? Like in a state? I'm confused. Are you kidding me, or are you being serious right now?
I am asking you why they would not forward something that is the feds to the feds.
because again, they're not the federal office. So yes, you make that report and that's great, but they have no obligation to advance it anywhere else. And the federal government system is entirely different from local and state systems, right?
But remember how we heard the lawyer call herself a paralegal in a sarcastic tone earlier? Well, Lyle would take this as her being serious and start to use it to refer to her as one, again showing his lack of picking up on social cues.
If you are a lawyer, which I don't know, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that you are.
That's fine. You can call me a paralegal.
Are you really a paralegal? Because I don't think you are. If you're
I don't know why you call me a paralegal.
Like
I understand that that's often some people's attempts to try and invalidate my experience because it's much more common for women to be paralegals than men, but that's not correct, and I'm not going to play with that. Yes, I'm a lawyer.
I specifically said she's a lawyer when I asked.
Didn't you say call me a paralegal if you want? Or did I
said you're welcome to do whatever you want. I expect this sort of behavior, especially from someone in your age bracket, to either invalidate my education or invalidate what I'm stating. I get that, but I don't care to talk about that.
The lawyer would start to show her confusion as how Lyle doesn't know about resources like Rain to help people who have issues like this despite being a so-called predator hunter. She would then say she believes he's a bully and wishes he was just honest about the way he acts as she wraps things up and leaves the call soon after. The rest of the call is Stardust wrapping things up and not saying too much we haven't heard already, and things would end off shortly after. This call is so fascinating because it shows that he again misunderstands social cues a lot, and I highly recommend watching it on your own time to get the full experience, because knowing that he's autistic, it makes a lot of the things he says and does make so much more sense in how he carries himself. On May 16th, 2024, Lyle would get the owner of the FCK Leaks Twitter account named Ren into a call in his new Discord server, the Cat's Lair. Alongside talking about the FCK stuff, Ren would also talk about Lyle as well, including the unsubstantiated claims that Jordan made against him. Lyle was understandably pissed about this given the lack of evidence, and so he would start to take his anger out on him for believing Jordan in the first place in a Walmart McDonald's as the power was out at his place.
You ever thought that maybe, just maybe, there wasn't evidence because it didn't freaking happen? And if the tables were turned, you'd be really, really upset. But nobody came to you for their side, did it? You'd be really mad. You didn't. Instead, what I get from you is an asinine text about your personal values on disowning, which has nothing to do with mine, has nothing to do with anything that went on in my home. And frankly, you're not even in a position to say because you don't have kids and you never had to care for anybody.
Yeah.
Or do you think that being disrespectful to my wife while her father is dying is somehow acceptable now?
I wasn't. So.
You weren't aware because you didn't ask, Rin.
Lyle would follow up saying that Rin never asked for his side during this, in which she reads messages he sent where Rin clearly asked for his side, only to pivot and now say that Rin didn't actually care for his side as a way to manipulate the conversation into a new direction and in his favor.
You did not ask my side, Rin. I'm going to get the text right now. You will not sit here after you were very open and honest with Yoon and lie to my face. That is not going to happen, and I will not permit that. Here is what you said. I saw Kumo's recent video of Jordan. Jordan says you disowned him and wanted your side of the story because Kumo is an unreliable source, but Jordan much is. You didn't actually want my side of the story.
Yes, I did. Stop and say.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And the reason why I don't believe you is because you ran with it, Rin.
As Lyle would continue to go at Rin in the call, Rin would tell him how he's not even supposed to be online as he's hiding in the closet to make sure his dad won't hear him. Rin has had issues with his father due to him not respecting their transgender identity and was recently released from a mental hospital as he said so in the call. And instead of Lyle figuring out this could all put him at risk, he's more interested in keeping the conversation going, and when Rin would mention how he felt Lyle was trying to isolate him, he would reply with this right here.
At one point I was very paranoid and I thought you did actually want to isolate, but that was a wrong assumption because
Rin, if I wanted to isolate you, I would have just called your dad. Because you did give me his number. One of the first messages you sent me on text.
Yeah, that was stupid of me.
Mind you, he says this well knowing Rin's dad doesn't respect him at all and is hiding in the closet just to do the call, showing yet another example of him trying to scare his opponent online into submission. The rest of the call isn't of much importance as other people join to talk, but interestingly enough, this would be the last bad thing he ever did, as since then he's been chilling out for around a year now. In fact, it was putting things together here for this video that I started to realize there's more going on here than just a deranged dude online, but something that goes into much more interesting territory in my opinion. The downfall of Lio Convoy in the Senate has been one of the most fascinating situations I've ever learned about on the internet. However, there's one thing that bugged me about this coverage that kind of really put everything into a different perspective for me, and it's the fact that despite Lio doing all this bad stuff, I actually feel a little bit bad for him. The reason why is because when listening to countless hours of Discord calls and other ArtCC shenanigans, the number of times I've heard some sort of iteration of the phrases, "just wait until I get Lio into this call," or "do you want to speak to Lio about this instead of me?" was an absolutely insane amount. That's when I started to realize that within these circles there were a lot of people who wanted to do all this bullying themselves. They were just too chicken shit to do it in fear of backlash, and so would drag in the one guy who wasn't scared to fight their battles for them. I view those people as lesser than Lio, because if there's one thing I don't like, it's people who can't even own their shit and instead try to jump through all these hoops to bully someone through another person who isn't scared to, as that, my friends, is some of the most bitch-made and weak stuff you can possibly do as a person. It's so obvious to me that people would use Lio as a crutch to bully others, and that's where the part I feel bad for him a little bit stems from. He was a weapon in these circles during his time there, and he was a very good one given how effective and how much power and influence he had in that community. It just all came crashing down when people outside those circles learned about him and just how far back his malicious and deranged nature went. I know he's not involving himself in any messes anymore, and in fact has even made amends with Gilded Poo from the looks of it, as Gilded would end up privating this video he made on Lio showing a photo of his wife. So clearly he's trying to right his wrongs with some of the people he did dirty. So hey, maybe he will actually get his shit together and stop being a malicious person one day. He even defended Lio after someone tried to slander him and label him as a pedo despite this being completely incorrect and downright malicious. And I gotta give them both credit for fixing their issues together and ending up on a good note despite everything that had gone down between each other. As far as Lio not being a malicious person anymore, it seems he's actually gotten that under control thanks to the help of his new friends, as after that ring call, nothing involving him starting issues has gone down, and in fact, I've been told they're on good terms now. I was told the same about the Jib stuff as well, and the fact he's made amends with pretty much everyone he's done wrong is a good thing overall. I can see he's finally figured out he was the one acting bad in these situations and did the right thing and fixed what he did to them the best way he could. On top of that, if there's something I've noticed throughout this coverage, it's that despite doing a lot of weird and bad things, he never did them thinking he wasn't doing the right thing in my opinion. For example, Lio let people live at his own home after their lives weren't going right. Very few people would ever open up their homes for another person, especially an internet stranger, and even though the whole adopting kids thing was very weird, it's clear to me this wasn't something with sexual undertones or similar. He really felt as if he was being a father figure to them in a way, and though as we know he clearly wasn't, and in hindsight he probably understands how weird that dynamic was, he did want to help those people out. The same thing with doxing all those people or threatening to do so. You saw how for half a decade he was the only one in those awful circles like top of the barrel in the Senate who was willing to escalate things like that because the other people were scared to do it in fear of backlash and so had him do it on their behalf. And I think part of the reason he was like this was because of this sense of justice he has. It's why he took up the predator hunting stuff even though he was awful at it. And it's why a lot of people in ArtCC like Hopeless Peaches for example took advantage of his sense of justice to have him dish out their grievances against other people they didn't like. It's interesting looking back on the Jack situation, because this was the one that revealed just how far Lio's past the doxing people went, and the fact he was doing it to children over simple yelling matches on Discord showed that he became this very unhinged man after all these years of being around this crowd of people. It's also where I get a little bit conflicted here, because even though I can acknowledge that the influences from the bad actors around Lio playing on his skewed sense of justice enabled his behavior at a very fast rate, he was still the one who was threatening and doxing many people for over half a decade and escalating all these situations until it all came crashing down. It begs the question on who's really to blame, and if I'm being honest, it's definitely both sides here, as it was clear that people even before the ArtCC like with Michael French were on the same level as him, and those on top of the barrel in the Senate saw him as a guy who would do the arguing or doxing on their behalf so they didn't have to deal with the backlash. But he was also in his early 30s by that point in time and should have known better to not dox people, including children, to begin with. But he did, and in turn this toxic symbiotic relationship of sorts marched on for over half a decade until wider internet audiences learned about him, only for those closest to him to go on and throw him under the bus to try and save their own skin. I know Lio's been doing better since he found himself a new friend group, and he has shown that he's trying to right his wrongs, which is more effort than most people who get exposed for being deranged tend to go. I also know he jumped on a cancellation train against Just a Robot recently, and while I find him dipping his toes into ArtCC drama again pretty confusing given how it basically ruined his career, I find it hard to care so long as he doesn't threaten or dox people anymore given it's such a tiny corner of the internet that nobody really cares about outside of seeing how crazy they are. It's basically a guessing game at this point if he finds himself back on his shit, but given it's been over a year and nothing's gone down since, maybe this will end up being one of the few stories I cover where the person in question actually fixes themselves for the better. One thing's for sure though, this dude is definitely one of the most deranged people I've ever come across in investigating these niche corners of the internet for good stories to cover, but at least it seems he ain't gonna be doing any of that anymore from the looks of it. Shout out to my channel members for helping support my content, and shout out to my bestie tier members Wrathwollen, Nami, Cody, Laura Hertzman, Cheems, Daniel, Mystical GB, Hyper aka V, and Trendy Dragon. Go check out my Patreon and YouTube memberships if you want to support me yourself in the description below, and I hope you join as soon as you can. If there's any lesson to be learned here, it's that the RCC is one of the most toxic and cancerous corners of the internet, and a corner that has had so many fascinating situations happen that some of y'all have no idea about. There are countless small stories I've learned about while making this video, and after everything I learned about these people, I can't help but get more and more wrapped up in the insanity within. There's a lot of stuff to be talked about in the RCC, but that's for another time. So until then, I'm just going to be looking more and more to see what else has gone down on that side of the internet, because I feel I'm just barely at the tip of the iceberg here.